In 1977, a nightclub opened in New York that would destroy some of the world's most beautiful women and make others into legends. Studio 54 opened its doors and drew a line in the city. Outside, winter coats and disappointment. Inside, heat, light, and a room that fed on attention. Behind its velvet rope, Supermodels found a playground where rules fell away. White powder sat on tables like spilled sugar. One wrong step could cost a career. Two women crossed that threshold again and again. Grace Jones left as an icon. Carangi would be gone at 26. Same entrance, same music, same temptations, very different fates. This is the story of the models who crossed that floor, what they found there, and what it cost them. Between 1977 and 1980, this single nightclub could raise a name to the masthead of a magazine or grind a career under its mirrored ball. The line between triumph and ruin came down to one skill: knowing when to stop dancing. For 3 years, Studio 54 was fashion's most dangerous gamble. Here is what it looked like when the lights finally came up. Studio 54 erupted onto Midtown's West 54th Street in April 1977 and turned into fashion's after-hours headquarters within weeks. Co-owner Steve Rubel stood at the door with a bouncer's stare and a showman's sense of casting, selecting faces as if he were building a scene. The entrance worked on a simple logic: absolute control at the rope, then a promise of freedom once you passed it. The emblem outside, a stylized 54 and the grinning man in the moon, told newcomers exactly what mood the room expected: glamour, nerve, and no apologies. Designer Halston treated the club like a second office with better lighting. He sat in the elevated booths with Liza Minnelli and Bianca Jagger, looked over the floor like a director, and used the room to keep his brand hot long after business hours. His models, the Halstonettes, including Pat Cleveland, Karen Bjornson, and Alva Chin.
You're a devotee of Studio 54. It's good for everybody on every level of society.
Floated down the stairs in liquid jersey and silk, and the dance floor turned into a moving runway. When they moved, the crowd made space without being asked. For young models newly arrived in New York, the place worked like a shortcut. A small booking could become a big one after a single photograph from the club hit the gossip columns. The usual rules that governed castings in daylight, call times, diet notes, clipped politeness, had less weight after midnight. The room rewarded presence more than patience. Andy Warhol stood at the center of that social experiment. He described the place in a way the regulars repeated for years: a strict gate at the door, a level field inside. Once a face cleared Rubel's glance, the floor allowed collisions that didn't happen anywhere else. An unknown girl might end up laughing with a princess. A new model could be a headline by breakfast if someone with a camera liked what they saw. That freedom had compartments. Past the main floor, past ropes and unmarked doors, rooms waited where the night took on a different speed. Silver trays passed between hands. Couples vanished behind curtains and came back changed. In those spaces, silence kept reputations intact and favors piled up. The scene made careers because it made myth quickly. It damaged careers for the same reason. Grace Jones did not enter Studio 54 so much as occupy it. Tall, angular, impossible to miss, she arrived in looks that set the temperature of the room. 1 week, she wore body paint that caught the strobes. Another, a sharp uniform that turned her posture into a weapon. Another, sculptural shapes that broke clean lines across the dance floor. The DJs watched the stairs for her silhouette. When she appeared, the room gathered itself, and then the beat hit harder. Grace later wrote that the club gave her a space to let everything out, and that clarity shows in the way she used it. Every entrance was planned, every gesture fed the persona she was building, and nothing she did in that room was casual. Jerry Hall, the Texas blonde who was already a headline, treated the place like an extension of the job. A 1978 photograph makes the point. She moves through the floor with Mick Jagger at her side, but her head is turned half an inch toward the nearest camera. She understood lighting, angles, and how to feed a legend without losing control of it. Studio 54 made her more visible, and she used that visibility to keep her bookings strong. Other regulars from fashion used the room with a specific kind of purpose. Iman, the Somali beauty, became a regular. She'd arrive with designer friends, always impeccably styled, but she possessed something the others would later recognize as essential: timing. "I did the whole Studio 54 thing," she'd later say. "My saving grace was that I always knew when to leave the party." Each of these women read Studio 54 differently. Grace saw a stage and turned it into a part of her art. Jerry saw a camera and gave it work to do. Gia saw acceptance and a fast track into the circle she wanted. Those readings, more than fame itself, set the direction of what followed. In September 1977, designer Kenzo Takada staged a fashion show on the club's floor and made a new kind of event. Partygoers pressed close with drinks in hand while models walked inches from them. Jerry Hall worked that makeshift catwalk like a pro, and the crowd became part of the show without an invitation. The room was no longer just a party. It was a venue that let fashion play with risk. The finale went to Grace Jones. Dressed in black leather with a whip in hand, she performed "I Need a Man" to cheers that blurred the line between concert, runway, and spectacle. The club had turned into a place where designers could present ideas without the usual rules, and models could build persona with every step they took. Halston understood this merger before most. He engineered moments that treated the crowd like a cast. One night, a net high above the dance floor opened and dropped accessories and pieces of clothing into eager arms. His Halstonettes did not need a runway. They needed a groove, and then the clothes sold themselves by motion and attitude. That shift put a new job on models: be present, be watchable, and be consistent at midnight as well as noon. Photographers adjusted. Francesco Scavullo and Helmut Newton worked the room and found faces where the light was wild and the expressions unguarded. Editors took notes as easily at the club as they did in a casting office. The hunt for the next cover could start on the floor, not in a studio, and it showed in the faces that carried the next season. Designer Diane von Furstenberg, creator of the wrap dress, found liberation in this blend. "I had more fun at Studio 54 than in any other nightclub in the world," she'd later recall. The floor gave her a way to separate from meetings and remember why people liked clothes in the first place. Movement, confidence, the simple lift of a good night. For models who could handle it, this new after-hours world turned into a platform. For those who could not, the pace wore grooves into their lives. By 1978 and into 1979, a split appeared in how the room treated working models. One track favored people who used the space to extend their craft and control their image. The other pulled people under when the club's speed became their daily rhythm. Grace Jones stayed on the first track. She pushed looks, tested ideas, and made Studio 54 part of her performance vocabulary. She saw the private spaces and the shortcuts that tempted insiders and kept a line between scene and self. That discipline let her leave the room with a stronger brand than she had on arrival. Jerry Hall did the same in her own way. She danced hard, kept friends close, and made sure every frame taken of her helped the next booking. She avoided the darker corners because being photographed sharp at 2 a.m. mattered more than staying until sunrise. The club could build a career only if the image that came out of it was usable. Gia began to slide. What started as a casual line on a table between friends became part of the night's routine. The invitations multiplied. The places off the main floor that older hands treated with caution turned into regular stops. She was young, newly famous, and welcomed everywhere. That kind of access brings pressure to match the room's energy, and she matched it. Janice Dickinson lived in between. She went out with Warhol's crowd, dated movie stars, and admitted later that stimulants helped her stay thin and keep pace. It worked until it did not. The middle path led to a wobble that showed up on runways and in call sheets. In December 1978, federal agents raided Studio 54 and found garbage bags of cash in the building. That image, money literally stuffed out of sight, was a flare that should have signaled limits to everyone who depended on the place. If the owners faced consequences, the room would not protect anyone else. The floor kept spinning through 1979, but the mood shifted, and the smartest people in fashion began to set earlier nights. In March 1980, Gia Carangi lost the person who anchored her career and steadied her in the business. Wilhelmina Cooper, the agent who had believed in her and shielded her more than once, died of lung cancer. The absence knocked something vital out of Gia's routine. Work slipped. Relief took priority. The straw gave way to the needle. Francesco Scavullo, who'd photographed Gia at her peak, watched the transformation with horror. During a Caribbean shoot, she broke down completely. She was crying. She couldn't find her drugs. I literally had to lay her down on her bed until she fell asleep. The images from this period show the change. Her eyes, once magnetic with life, now carried an emptiness that no amount of retouching could hide. At the same time, Studio 54 entered its own reckoning. Co-owners Rubel and Ian Schrager faced the sentences that followed their tax case, and the club's first life ended. The last parties felt like encores for a song everyone knew had reached its last chorus. People who could afford to leave the room early did that. People who were still living on the room's timeline kept dancing. Grace Jones was launching her music career, transforming the persona she'd crafted at Studio 54 into commercial success. Her album's portfolio and fame captured the club's sound while she moved beyond its confines. She'd used Studio 54 as a laboratory for her art, and now she was taking that art global. Iman followed a plan that looked simple but required nerve. Do the scene, then go home. She kept that balance through the next decade, built a life that made headlines for stability instead of scandal, and saved her energy for work that mattered. Halston's house began to lose altitude. The habits that helped him float through Studio 54 at its peak did not serve him in boardrooms. The confidence that drew crowds in the club turned brittle in business. By the mid-1980s, the brand that looked like an American dream had fractured. Gia ran out of buffers. Track marks grew harder to hide. She left shoots to meet needs that outranked everything else. Agencies that once fought to represent her namesake aura closed their books. Calls stopped. Studio 54's original incarnation ended not with a bang, but with a whimper. As Rubel and Schrager entered federal prison, the space that had defined an era suddenly felt like any other emptying nightclub at dawn. Tawdry, exhausted, littered with evidence of excess. Fashion dispersed. Some people found new rooms. Some went home and slept more. Gia Carangi attempted rehabilitation programs but couldn't shake her dependence. By 1983, she'd left New York entirely, returning to Philadelphia, her modeling career a memory. The woman who'd commanded magazine covers now lived in obscurity, her beauty ravaged, her body bearing the permanent marks of her choices. Janice Dickinson's decline played out more publicly but less tragically. Her substance use escalated until she literally fell off a runway into Sophia Loren's lap, intoxicated beyond function. Unlike Gia, Janice would eventually find sobriety, though the years she lost to it are part of her record, and she talks about them as warnings for young models. Grace Jones pivoted into film. Conan the Destroyer and A View to a Kill used the same strength she honed on the floor. A look that could shut a room up and a presence that made every line feel like a hit. She had treated the club as rehearsal, and the camera gave her a bigger stage. Jerry Hall took the life she built dancing beside rock's biggest frontman and turned it into a long run of modeling, family, and steady work. Her nights at Studio 54 became part of the personal legend rather than the center of it. The key there is control. She banked the benefit and moved on. Iman married David Bowie in 1992, became one half of a couple that defined quiet style, and kept a hand in the industry through work that matched her pace. Her time at the club now reads as early chapters in a long biography that values boundary more than myth. The Halstonettes scattered with their patrons' business decline. Pat Cleveland modeled across continents. Karen Bjornson stepped back from the grind. The floor that had turned them into sculpture no longer existed, and the work became the work again: castings, fittings, and travel. On November 18, 1986, Gia Carangi died in Philadelphia at Hahnemann University Hospital. She was 26. Complications from AIDS took her life. Needles that once felt like release had carried a virus that would change the world. Gia is remembered as one of the first famous women lost to the disease, and the timing reads like a chapter marker in the culture that raised her up and dropped her. The wider circle around the club suffered the same blow. Halston died of AIDS-related illness in 1990. Steve Rubel died in 1989. The same years that gave the world the polished memory of Studio 54 also filled obituaries with names tied to those nights. The cost sat in the background of every bright photograph from the late 1970s once people knew what to look for. Grace Jones kept working. In 2008, she released Hurricane, a record that landed with authority because her persona still had charge in it. When she speaks about Studio 54 now, it sounds like a chapter she needed and then set down. The lessons stayed. The dependents did not. The room reopened under new management and different rules. People came to dance and to remember. They did not recreate the 3-year stretch that put the place into history. That window belonged to a city and a business caught at a very specific temperature. You cannot repeat heat like that. You recognize it and accept the burn if you touched it. Fashion still carries pieces of those nights. The idea that a model is more than a pretty face sits on every casting brief now. Agencies look for a story, a presence, a way to move in a room. The belief that a party can be a runway shows up every season in shows that run late and flow into gatherings where cameras wait. The warning sits there too. Pace matters, exit plans matter, and work survives only if the person doing it does. Today's top names live in a world that broadcasts their every move in real time. That exposure changes the type of risk, but the core choice is the same. How much of yourself do you feed to the night, and when do you go home? The models who last answer that early and stick to it. Studio 54 existed in its original form for less than 3 years, but its echo runs through fashion like a low bass line that never quite stops. The place gave Grace Jones a stage to test a character who could carry music, film, and photography. It placed Gia Carangi in the center of a crowd that loved her until she could not carry herself. The room elevated names and broke bodies. People who survived those nights kept a simple distinction in their heads. Perform excess. Do not live it. Command the room. Do not let the room command you. The venue told the truth about itself from the start. It was seductive and dangerous, and it never lied about that. The bargain on offer was clear. Everything you want is available. The charge lands when you sign. Grace and Iman managed the cost and walked out upright. Gia paid with years she never got to live. The velvet rope no longer parts. The disco ball has stopped spinning, but the question that powered that era remains. When the music cuts and the lights hit every corner, who are you standing on that floor? For a generation of supermodels, the way they answered that question decided whether Studio 54 made them or destroyed them.